You know, there was a Star Trek episode I remember from the original series that had crossed my mind not too long ago. It involves them going to one of these planets. Don't remember the episodes. I'm not a big sci-fi or Trekkie fan or whatever, but all these people are living in terror of this particular deity. And from what my memory recalls of it, it was named something like Landrow, something like that. But I remember this entire civilization, they find it's kind of backwards, it's kind of primitive to some degree, and they all live in terror of upsetting this deity because it can hear your thoughts. It can hear if you have any resentments against it. Literally, I remember the word resentment even being in there. Memory is faulty though, so I can't say for certain. I'm not going to go look for the episode and find it out. But of course, this all-powerful, all-knowing deity that terrifies everybody and keeps them in submission turns out to be nothing more than some faulty computer that they don't even actually understand. It has a stuck program. It's not really, in today's modern world, that big of a deal in terms of science fiction and plots. I mean, it was even done in a major Star Trek motion picture, the famous line where William Shatner says, "Excuse me, but what does God need with a starship?" Which, everybody was so horrified that you'd dare question the deity or whatever. But in fact, I even remember a similar idea being explored in the Next Generation. And yeah, I actually did watch that back then because we didn't have nothing on TV at the time. This was in an era, in a decade when adults actually argued over Dallas and Dynasty. Okay, even I, who didn't even watch either of those, even knew the headline about who shot JR. So yeah, I mean, I'm just saying I watched The Next Generation because I didn't have a whole lot to choose from and we couldn't afford cable television at the time. But even that had episodes similar along that line. And like I said, theoretically, it's not an original type of question, even in regards to religion or leaders or rulers or whatever. I mean, Machiavelli even explored the idea, is it better to be loved or is it better to be feared? But the basis of this video, when it comes to the gist I was trying to make, when the thought crossed my mind, can you truly love something that you're terrified of? Because I remember how many people, when I was in AA, as long as I was, they would go around and they couldn't wait to say in a meeting with an opportunity how much they loved AA, how much AA had done for them, how much AA had really saved their life, how much AA was just, AA was just the most awesome thing in the whole entire universe, and they were so grateful to be groveling at the altars of AA. Now, in the case of the malicious, often malevolent old-timers, it was very obvious what their intentions were when they would say they loved AA, and you would see it a lot, been here 25 years, seen a million people die, and I love this program so much and all of that. Yeah, what you really love is you love the the effect that you get off of being powerful. You love the effect of being able to sit in a room full of people and have them all hinge on your every word. You love the power, but you don't really love the program. I mean, you're a fucking phony, as so many of these old timers are. The ones that aren't neurotic and insane, and I have met those in there as well. But for a lot of people who are, they're kind of new to the whole entire deal, they haven't been in it very long, or the people that have been around for a little while that profess their love for the program, I know that even at times when I was a dedicated cult member and a true believer in the whole entire thing, there was an undercurrent of fear every time I professed to love the AA program. Every time I professed to, really appreciate the wonders of the AA program, I was kind of afraid, because the alternative that AA pushes for you is jails, institutions, and deaths if you don't keep doing the almost medieval style rituals of these few little things like pieces of paper and calling people on the phone and making coffee is going to stave off the insatiable monsters of jails, institutions, and death, which will happen to you when the demon of alcoholism comes for you. These are the only exorcism rituals to keep these monsters at bay. Is it really truly possible to actually love something that you're afraid of? And that kind of led me down a little bit of a rabbit hole to looking around on the internet. I don't have a lot of spare time these days. I work 2 jobs now. But, it led me down the places where I was looking at a question about why people oftentimes defend their abusers. And I don't have a clear-cut answer for that. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have those that resolved. But I mean, I knew, and I've shared about this in a video on here before, I knew of people who were horrible, miserable people that made everybody around them miserable in my own household and in my own family. And it was almost like the what is the name of the syndrome where you bond with your kidnapper, except it wasn't quite like that, because I caught myself doing the same thing when people would call out what horrible, toxic people these people were. I don't do it any longer. I don't defend people that are toxic any longer. But in cases where I knew people that were getting the brunt of the abuse a little bit more than even I was, I'm not necessarily talking about physical. I'm talking about the psychological wearing down of someone that's constantly degrading and tormenting you. They would say, well, you know, the person is, they're kind of set in their ways. They would make that kind of excuse. Or they would say something like, well, you know, they came from a different time period, you know, where, you know, this, that, and the other. Or they would say something along the lines of they're having a bad day. Or, well, they do a lot of good things, too. You can't deny that, you know. All the minimalist excuses you make for someone that is really indefensible to begin with. Like I said, I know of one particular family member that, I mean, made everybody around them a living hell. And when that person died, I don't remember feeling anything more than a sigh of relief that that person was gone and could inflict no more misery and pain on anybody any longer. I know my dad got a brunt of their misery. My grandfather got a brunt of their misery, and on and on. And I'm not going to get into the personal family dynamics here, but I was just thinking about, there were people that I know that person made depressed, neurotic, miserable. You know, I could create a long, long list there. And those people, when that person passed away, were professing their love for that person. They were truly a good person deep down inside. You know, they were truly a caring person. They really just wanted what was best and all of that other kind of thing. And I was wondering, can you fully ever really accept something like that as a fact? Or can you really fully accept any kind of abuse as being an actual love? Can you love something you're afraid of? You know, because the program hinges on you being afraid. If it wasn't for fear that binds the program together, that holds people in those rooms, the ones who aren't court ordered and they're afraid of the judges and the legal system, which I can understand, I've been there, or the people that are addicted to the program because of their own outlet, you know, for them to be sponsors and for them to be old timers and for them to be wise ones. And, you know, really it's a pathetic type of insecurity that I think, I don't have proof of it, that lurks underneath those people. They seem really desperate for some kind of attention, to be some kind of an expert in some kind of field that they don't have. It was almost like, I remember a forum I was looking at one time where it these people who were in the military were making fun of all these guys that, you know, they're always making up these tall tales about what they did in the Army. It had a meme of Sean Bean with his hand like that, and it said, one does not simply steal valor, you know, when it comes to the glory stories and things like that. That, to me, is what the old-timer subsection of the program is. But for the people who are there that are truly afraid that if they don't keep doing the AA meetings, that if they don't keep going, that if they don't keep you know, doing all these things, that alcohol is going to eventually come out and it's going to destroy them. And then when that does happen, when an inevitability of a relapse takes place, when the inevitability of just slipping takes place and it turns into a full-blown relapse because you don't think you've had enough as the program has taught you, can you really truly say that you actually love something when you got to live kind of in fear of it as well? You know, even in the 1984 book that I've quoted on here a lot of times, there's a scene where the beaten protagonist is talking to the party leader, and he says, the party leader asks him, how does one exert control over others? And he gives him the simple answer, by making him suffer. And the answer, of course, yeah, indeed, by making them suffer. Because I don't think you can ever be truly happy in anything, or truly serene, or what AA calls happy, joyous, and free, if you have to live in fear with this constant thing in the back here. Any day now, any moment now, I could be out there drunk again, and I might not make it back. I might overdose. I might commit suicide. I might do all of these things that, you know, I remember feeling really helpless in AA in the face of that kind of feeling back there, totally unaware of the fact that none of that stuff ever had to happen again if I just chose not to do those things again. It had nothing to do with reiterating the medieval superstitions of, well, I wrote this stuff down on a piece of paper today. I made a list. That's going to keep the alcohol monster back there for a little while longer. I talked to my sponsor on the phone today, so the alcohol monster is a little bit further back there today. None of these things you're doing in AA is actually keeping these relapses at bay. The only thing that's keeping the relapses at bay is your personal decision not to go back to it. I mean, cravings are very powerful. Cravings are very strong. But ultimately, the decision to not give in to those ultimately comes down to me and me alone. I know that so many times I would end up drunk and wasted and back into the whole entire cycle of drinking in the morning and everything. And I would say, well, yeah, I'm just not honest with myself. It must be something wrong with me. I go to the AA meetings, I apply myself, and it just doesn't work for me. I really, truly think that the doctrine of powerlessness and the doctrine of fear kept me in there a lot longer than... let's just say if someone had shown me during that time period the power of my own determination, the power of my own inner strength, the power in my own drive to overcome it, I don't know if I would have struggled for as many years as I did. But in terms of living in a constant state of turmoil, living in a constant state of agitation and anxiety, that back here somewhere is these horrible creeping relapses coming to get me, and I love this program so much for keeping them at bay. There's an element almost of the same religious style of punishment that I remember as a child growing up. It was really hard for me to accept this idea that something loves me unconditionally, that cares all about me, but if I step outside the boundaries of its rules and regulations, then I get to burn forever. Now, of course, I don't know what the Catholic Church is like these days, but I remember back then you did have an opt-out style of purgatory that you could potentially hope for, but there was still always the nagging notion of not being good enough for God, not being good enough for the deity, not being good enough for the commandments and the rules and the regulations. And you never know, you might just screw up one too many times and you can spend an eternity burning by something that actually totally loves you unconditionally. They talk about loving higher powers and the group as a group conscience and a loving entity, yet there's no love in those rooms. There's a lot of intolerance, there's a lot of hate, and there's a lot of fear. It's really funny they have entire meetings around the subject of fear, and fear being a dangerous thing that can actually kill alcoholics, and yet the whole entire organization, if you take away the courts, and you take away the bullies, and you take away the toxic people that just love being old-timers, if you take away those elements, the one thing that keeps people united and glued together in the rooms of AA is fear. They're afraid if they stop going to the meetings, they'll end up drunk again. They're afraid that if they quit reading that silly book and doing those inventories and doing those steps, that they're going to end up drunk again. They're, at the back of their mind, the whole entire motivating factor is fear. And yet, you're supposed to proclaim that the program has saved your life and you love it, but can you really love something that rules you like some kind of, as I've used the term before, and it was originally a Chris Hitchens term, but it was a celestial North Korea, something that's got its ever watchful eye on you, and if you violate any codes and commandments and rules and regulations, you will be punished in some horrific way, whether it's a relapse or whether it's eternal damnation. You're still living under a threat of coercion. And I don't know if you can ever truly love something that operates in such a fashion. I don't remember being afraid of my parents. I don't remember, I had difficulties with them, of course. I had difficulties with my dad. I've talked about my guilt before, being arrogant in a way that only the really young can be with him. But I don't remember ever being terrified of him. I mean, he put discipline down. He had rules and regulations. He was a little bit more lenient than my mother could be. I mean, if I had really fucked something up, I generally went to him first and hoped like hell he might could shield me from some of the disciplinary action that was inevitable in coming my way. But even with my mother, when she was in one of her really, really, really angry moods and was really, you really wanted to be scarce in her presence or whatever, I never was afraid of my mother. I never thought to myself, that there was nothing I couldn't go to my mother with when it came to be a serious problem or something like that. I never felt like I lived in terror of my mother or my father. And So I can't honestly say, when it comes to, I'm giving the earliest examples of what would be something you might love and fear at the same time. I mean, there were certain rules you didn't break around my house because you didn't want to, necessarily go through the consequences of it. Then there were certain rules. It's like, well, I've done this one before, and I'm pretty sure I can get away with that one. But I don't think those rules really operated on fear and fear alone. And there were certain things that you didn't do around my house out of respect for your parents. I mean, I wouldn't have never dreamed of cussing my parents out or trying to do certain things like that. But it wouldn't be because I was afraid of them. It was just because I wouldn't have thought about doing that to them. I'm not saying I was some saintly good guy from, like so many older people. Well, back in my day, I did this and did that. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there is a certain type of respect I had for my parents that wasn't motivated out of just fear of consequences. But it wasn't ever a parental relationship of fear. My early relationship with religion and the church, it was motivated primarily out of fear. And my motivations with AA and trying to stay sober were motivated out of fear that if I didn't do AA, that I was going to die drunk. It's really interesting that these days I'm not motivated out of fear of a relapse. I'm not terrified of alcohol. I'm with coworkers who drink. I see people who drink. I drive by liquor stores. I've been in, well, not since COVID, but I've been in concerts around alcohol and everything else. I'm not really living in terror of alcohol today. It's funny how that's completely changed now that I'm no longer in the cult religion of Quackaholics Anonymous. Anyway, I kind of went all over the place here, but I was ultimately posing a question that kind of was galvanizing to me that led to this video whatsoever. Can you truly love something you're afraid of? I don't think you actually can. Anyway, hopefully it won't be a month or two before another one gets put up.